In a quiet neighborhood, there lived a black woman in her late 30s who carried a heart bigger than anyone could imagine. She lived in a modest, single-story house that had seen better days, but she never cared much about the walls or the paint. What mattered to her was the people around her, especially those who struggled every day to make ends meet. Every morning, before the sun had even begun to peek over the rooftops, she was already awake, bustling around her small kitchen. The room was filled with the warm aroma of simmering soups and spices, the smell spreading out into the backyard where she worked tirelessly to prepare meals for anyone in need. She didn't have much money herself. Her life was simple, often making sacrifices to make sure she could buy enough ingredients. Sometimes she skipped meals or walked to the market to find discounted vegetables just to make her soups last longer. Her routine was almost like a ritual. She would wake up at 5, wash her hands, tie back her hair, and start chopping vegetables. Carrots, onions, cabbage, potatoes. They were all washed and cut with care. She cooked in large pots that she borrowed from friends or had been given by neighbors who admired her work. By the time the neighborhood began to stir, she had prepared enough meals to feed dozens of people. On some days, she would make a hearty stew, filled with beans, rice, and vegetables. On other days, she would prepare sandwiches with freshly baked bread, adding fruits or small treats when she could afford them. It was never about making the food fancy or expensive. It was about making sure no one left hungry. Word of her generosity spread quickly. People in the neighborhood began to talk about the woman with admiration. Parents would bring their children, showing them the value of kindness. Elderly neighbors, who often lived alone, would stop by just to feel the warmth of human connection, and even those who could afford their meals sometimes visited to be part of the caring community she was creating. The backyard of her small house slowly transformed into a place of gathering. Tables and chairs, some old and some borrowed, lined the yard. People would sit together, laugh together, and share stories while eating the meals she had prepared. There was something magical about the way her small, humble efforts brought people together. It wasn't just food. It was love, respect, and a sense of belonging. Across the street, however, there was a man who watched all of this with growing discomfort. He owned a small convenience store that had been in the neighborhood for years. It was his main source of income, and for a long time, he had relied on the community to buy from him. People would come in for bread, milk, snacks, and small groceries, and he had grown accustomed to their regular visits. But now, as he observed more and more people heading across the street to the woman's backyard, he felt a pang of jealousy. His store still sold food, yes, but it wasn't the same. People weren't just buying products, they were coming for warmth, connection, and care. The simple generosity of one woman had changed the flow of his business without him realizing it at first. Every morning as the line outside her home grew longer, the store owner would stand behind his counter fuming quietly. He muttered to himself about how unfair it was, how one person could steal his customers with nothing but kindness. He thought of ways to lure people back to his store, like lowering prices or putting up flashy signs. But deep down he knew that what he offered was just products. It could never match the sense of belonging and care that the woman provided. The more he watched, the more his envy grew. He felt powerless, as though no amount of effort on his part could compete with her generosity. Meanwhile, the woman remained unaware of the envy brewing across the street. She was completely absorbed in her mission to feed people. Her mornings were long and exhausting, yet she never complained. She welcomed everyone with a smile, asking about their day, remembering little details about their lives. She remembered which elderly neighbor liked extra bread with their meal, which children enjoyed fruits, and which families preferred soups without too much spice. Her attention to detail made everyone feel special, seen, and cared for. It wasn't about recognition or reward. It was about making a difference in the lives of people who often felt forgotten or invisible. Children in the neighborhood began looking forward to visiting her backyard as much as they looked forward to school recess or birthday parties. They would help in small ways, washing vegetables, arranging plates, or sweeping the yard after meals. Teenagers, who often wandered the streets without much to do, found purpose in helping her. Even small acts, like carrying a heavy pot of soup or setting up chairs, were appreciated. and she always thanked everyone with sincerity. The energy in her backyard was contagious. Families laughed together, neighbors shared stories, and even those who had felt isolated began to feel a part of something bigger than themselves. The store owner, however, grew increasingly agitated. He couldn't understand why people would choose a simple backyard over a shop filled with goods. He started spreading subtle complaints, suggesting to some customers that the woman's meals weren't safe or that it was strange to give food away for free. But no one listened. The people trusted her. They knew how much care went into every meal. The more he tried to bring doubt, the more he realized that kindness couldn't be challenged by lies or envy. His frustration deepened as he watched a family he had served for years smile and thank her sincerely. Despite the tension, the woman continued her work without pause. Rain or shine, hot or cold, she prepared her meals. She often worked silently, humming softly to herself, enjoying the quiet moments of cooking before the day began. Her motivation wasn't publicity, awards, or money. It was purely a desire to help others. She remembered the times in her life when she had been hungry or struggled to get by and didn't want anyone else to feel that same pain. That empathy became the fuel that kept her going, even when she felt tired or worn down. Neighbors often offered help in small ways, donating ingredients, pots, or even old tables and chairs. Some brought pastries, fruits, or canned goods they couldn't consume themselves. Even children would give her small coins or homemade treats, insisting she use them for the meals. The woman accepted every gift with gratitude, making sure to include the donor's contributions in the meals she served. Her backyard was no longer just a place to eat. It had become a symbol of community, care, and generosity. People looked forward to visiting, not because they had to eat, but because they felt connected, appreciated, and part of something meaningful. As weeks turned into months, the line outside her home continued to grow. It wasn't unusual for more than 50 people to gather at a single meal, and she welcomed every single one. She spoke to them gently, listened to their stories, offered advice when asked, and shared in their laughter and sorrows. Her presence brought comfort that went beyond food. The people she helped didn't just leave with full stomachs. They left with hope, a sense of belonging, and a reminder that there were still kind and selfless people in the world. The store owner, meanwhile, continued to watch from across the street, torn between admiration and envy. He could see the impact of her actions, and though his pride prevented him from acknowledging it openly, he felt a twinge of guilt for the resentment he had held. He realized that no money, no sale, and no marketing could ever replace the genuine warmth and generosity she offered. Slowly, an uneasy awareness began to settle in him. This woman, with her small acts of kindness, had achieved something far more powerful than he ever could with his store. Despite everything, she never sought recognition or validation. She didn't post her work on social media or expect anyone to notice her efforts. Her joy came from seeing the smiles on children's faces, hearing a grateful "thank you," or watching families connect over a shared meal. Her mission was simple but profound: to help those in need, to create community, and to show that even small acts of generosity could change lives. And in doing so, she was quietly transforming the neighborhood one meal at a time, without anyone fully realizing how far-reaching her influence had become. By the end of each day, after the last person had left and the tables were cleared, she would sit on her porch, exhausted but content. She often reflected on the lives she had touched, the stories she had heard, and the small but meaningful connections she had fostered. She knew she couldn't solve every problem or help everyone, but she also knew that what she offered was more than food. It was hope, dignity, and a reminder that someone cared. And in a world where so many people struggled in silence, that was enough to make a difference. The woman's mission to feed people in her neighborhood continued to grow, quietly but powerfully. Word about her generosity had traveled beyond her street. People from nearby blocks began to hear stories about the kind woman who cooked with love every morning and shared her meals freely. Families who struggled with rent or groceries started making their way to her small backyard, hoping for a warm meal. Some came out of curiosity, others because they were hungry, but all left with more than just food. They left feeling a little lighter, a little happier, and a little more connected to the community around them. Her backyard, which had once been empty and quiet, was now lively almost every day. Children laughed while running around the tables, some chasing each other between chairs while teenagers helped organize the food and carry dishes. Parents sat with their kids, enjoying a meal together and talking about their day. Elderly neighbors, many of whom lived alone, came to share a few stories, sometimes quietly sipping their soup while watching the joy around them. The woman always made sure everyone had enough to eat. She remembered each person's preferences and needs. If someone couldn't eat certain foods, she found alternatives. If a child liked extra bread or an elderly neighbor preferred softer vegetables, she made sure to provide it. People noticed the care she put into every small detail, and that care made them feel seen. Volunteers slowly began joining her efforts. At first, it was a few teenagers who wanted to help, but over time, more people showed up. Some brought extra vegetables or bread. Others helped wash dishes, set tables, or clean the yard afterward. Families would come together to volunteer, sometimes bringing their children to teach them the value of giving. It wasn't just about the meals anymore. It became a place to learn, to connect, and to share. Even those who could not cook offered help in other ways, carrying heavy pots, organizing donations, or helping people find a place to sit. The woman welcomed everyone with the same warmth, thanking them sincerely for their efforts. She made sure everyone felt important and appreciated. Meanwhile, across the street, the store owner watched this growing activity with unease. The more people gathered in her backyard, the fewer customers came to his store. He tried to tell himself it was just coincidence, but deep down he knew it wasn't. People were no longer just coming for food. They were coming for kindness. They were coming for a sense of community that he could not provide with shelves of packaged goods and cold counters. His jealousy grew each day, even as he tried to ignore it. He muttered complaints to himself, thinking of ways to compete, but he couldn't understand how one woman's generosity could draw so many people. As his jealousy grew, he tried small tricks. He discounted a few items, hoping people would come back for cheap deals. He rearranged the shelves to make the store look more appealing. He even told some customers that it was strange for someone to give away food for free, questioning if the meals were safe. But his efforts failed. The community knew her, trusted her, and appreciated the care she put into her cooking. No discount or warning could match the genuine warmth she offered. People continued to come, often smiling and carrying meals home to share with their families. The store owner felt powerless. His frustration turned into bitterness as he realized that money could not compete with love and compassion. The woman, however, remained unaffected by the jealousy across the street. She didn't even notice it most days because she was focused entirely on the people she served. Her mornings were long and exhausting, yet she worked with energy and patience. She chopped vegetables, stirred pots, and arranged plates while singing softly or humming familiar tunes. She loved the quiet moments before the crowd arrived, the time she had to prepare her meals carefully and thoughtfully. Her mission wasn't about recognition or reward. She didn't care if people noticed her efforts or if the news covered her work. What mattered to her was that people had a warm meal, a smile, and someone who cared about them. Sometimes, she would see a child arrive wearing worn-out shoes or a jacket with holes, and her heart would ache. She would make sure the child had something extra, a little treat or an additional helping of food. Sometimes parents would arrive carrying babies or toddlers, and she would make sure the family had enough for everyone. She noticed small details. If someone looked tired, worried, or sad, she would offer a comforting word or ask them about their day. Her presence was soothing, and people felt safe in her backyard. For many, it was the only place in their lives where they felt completely welcome and cared for without judgment. The volunteers, inspired by her example, began to take initiative. They suggested new ways to organize the meals, helped carry donations, and even encouraged children to take part in helping. Some teens would arrive early to sweep the yard or set up tables. Others would help distribute plates, making sure no one was left waiting too long. Even small acts like wiping down a chair or carrying water from the tap were valued. The woman always thanked everyone, making each person feel like their contribution mattered. Slowly, her backyard became not just a place for food, but a place for people to connect, learn, and grow together. The store owner's frustration reached new levels. He started noticing the little details, the laughter of children, the friendly conversations, the way the woman remembered each person's needs. He couldn't figure out how he could compete with something so simple yet so powerful. Money could buy products, but it couldn't buy trust, care, or love. He realized reluctantly that his jealousy wasn't just about business, it was about admiration, though he would never admit it to anyone. He watched his neighbors, some of whom he had known for years, smiled and left her yard with hearts lighter than when they came. That realization made him uncomfortable, but he couldn't look away. The woman, meanwhile, never let the growing crowds overwhelm her. She continued to treat each person individually, greeting them with warmth and attention. She listened to their stories, remembered names, and always made sure everyone had enough. Even when there were 50 or more people gathered, she moved gracefully between them, checking plates, offering seconds, and sharing laughter. Her calm and caring presence had a ripple effect. People left her backyard feeling valued and inspired, often carrying that kindness into their own lives. Some helped their neighbors with groceries. Others offered a smile or a small act of generosity in return. The woman's simple act of feeding people was slowly transforming the neighborhood, one interaction at a time. Children began to notice the joy of helping others. They learned how to wash vegetables, carry plates, and serve meals. Some would bring extra food from their own homes, insisting it be added to the shared meals. The woman encouraged them, teaching them that no act of kindness is too small. Teenagers, who often felt lost or idle, found purpose in volunteering. Families started coming together, not just to eat but to participate. What started as a mission to feed the needy had grown into a quiet but powerful movement of care, compassion, and community spirit. Despite the store owner's attempts to undermine her, the neighborhood's faith in her grew. People recognized the sincerity behind her efforts. They saw that she wasn't seeking fame, profit, or recognition. She simply cared. That made her trustworthy. Families felt safe sending their children to her yard, and elderly neighbors felt comforted knowing someone cared for them. The woman's work became a symbol of hope and compassion, quietly teaching everyone around her that generosity and love can create a stronger, more united community. As months passed, her backyard became more than just a place to eat. It was a place to connect, to learn, and to share. People who had once felt alone or invisible found a home there, even if only for a short time each day. They met neighbors they had never known. Children made friends, and families supported one another. Her simple act of cooking meals had turned into something far greater than food. It had created a community. And through it all, she remained humble, never boasting about her work, never seeking attention. Her joy came from the smiles she saw, the laughter she heard, and the small moments of connection she nurtured every day. The store owner, slowly but surely, began to realize something important. No amount of jealousy, criticism, or money could replace the genuine care she provided. He could sell products, but he could not feed hearts in the way she fed bodies and souls. And even though he would not admit it, a small part of him began to feel admiration. He could see the positive changes in the neighborhood, the bonds forming between people, and the difference one person could make. But for now, he still stood behind his counter, unsure how to approach the situation, watching as the woman quietly and tirelessly continued her mission, feeding, caring, and inspiring everyone around her. One ordinary afternoon, as the woman was arranging plates of steaming soup and fresh bread, a local reporter happened to walk by. The sound of laughter, chatter, and clattering dishes drew their attention. Curious, the reporter stepped closer and asked a few questions. "Why are you doing this?" they asked, genuinely amazed. The woman smiled softly, wiping her hands on a towel. "Because people deserve to eat," she said simply. "Everyone deserves to feel cared for. Some of us just have to step in when we see someone in need." The reporter was touched. They took pictures, made notes, and promised to tell her story. Within days, her story appeared online. People in neighboring towns began reading about the woman who fed dozens of families without expecting anything in return. The post went viral on social media, and soon donations of money, food, and supplies began arriving from all over. Some people sent bags of rice, canned goods, or fresh vegetables. Others sent funds to help her buy more ingredients and even repair her small backyard kitchen. She was overwhelmed, but in the best way possible. For the first time, she realized that her small efforts, which had always been quiet and local, were making a much bigger impact than she had imagined. The new resources allowed her to expand her operation. She could now prepare more meals each day, reaching even more families who struggled to make ends meet. Her volunteers grew as well. with people coming from neighboring areas wanting to help. Teens who had once wandered aimlessly now had a meaningful activity, learning to cook, organize, and care for others. Parents encouraged their children to participate, showing them the value of giving. The woman never lost sight of the heart of her mission. She continued to prepare meals with love, ensuring that each dish carried the same care and attention it had always had. Across the street, the store owner grew increasingly desperate. He watched the crowds forming in her backyard and saw how her story had attracted attention far beyond their small neighborhood. People who had never stepped foot in the area were now sending donations. His attempts to compete, discounts, flashy signs, or warnings about free food being unsafe were useless. He couldn't stop people from coming to her. The more he tried to find a way to regain his influence, the more powerless he felt. He realized that this was no longer just about competition for business. It was about admiration and resentment mixed together in a way he had never experienced before. The woman, though, continued without being distracted by the envy across the street. Her focus remained on the people she served. Each day she would start early, chopping vegetables, stirring pots, and making sure every meal was prepared with care. When people arrived, she greeted them warmly, asking about their families, their jobs, and their days. She remembered names, likes, dislikes, and even small details about each person's life. Children loved her because she always listened to their stories and made them feel important. Elderly neighbors appreciated her patience and kindness, knowing they were seen and respected. Everyone felt a sense of belonging in her backyard. The volunteers, inspired by her example, became more involved. Teens helped with cooking, children helped with distributing plates, and even adults who had no prior experience in volunteering found meaningful ways to contribute. They learned not just how to prepare food, but how to connect with people, how to listen, and how to show care. Some families who received meals began helping too, bringing extra ingredients or offering to wash dishes. Her backyard became more than a place to eat. It became a community center, a safe space where people felt valued, appreciated, and connected. The store owner's frustration and jealousy reached a tipping point. He had spent years thinking that people only came to him because of convenience or prices, but he now saw that they were drawn to her for something he could never offer: compassion. Every day he watched families leave her backyard with smiles and gratitude, carrying home not just food but hope and encouragement. No discount, no flashy advertisement, and no clever tactic could compete with that. His pride made it hard for him to admit it, but a small part of him began to feel admiration for the woman. He had never seen someone create such a positive impact on so many lives with so little. Despite the growing crowds and attention, she stayed grounded. She never allowed donations or media attention to change the way she treated people. Her meals were still cooked with the same care, served with the same warmth, and shared with the same respect. She always made sure to involve her volunteers, teaching them that every small act of kindness mattered. Even when the line grew long and the day felt exhausting, she moved gracefully, checking plates, offering seconds, and making sure everyone left satisfied. Her mission was simple but powerful: feed the needy, bring people together, and create a sense of community. Children especially benefited from her initiative. They learned the value of helping others, sometimes carrying extra plates or passing out fruit. Teenagers discovered skills they had never imagined, from cooking to organizing volunteers. Families who struggled financially learned how to share resources, cook together, and support one another. Every meal became more than just food. It became a lesson in empathy, responsibility, and generosity. Slowly, the neighborhood began to change. People were kinder, more aware of each other's needs, and more willing to offer help when they could. The store owner, increasingly aware of his own failings, struggled with conflicting emotions. He was angry at himself for letting jealousy control him for so long. He felt a sense of shame for trying to undermine her and an even deeper frustration at the power of genuine kindness. He had thought his store was the center of the community, but he realized that the woman had created something far more meaningful. People didn't just come to her backyard for food. They came for care, love, and connection. They came because she made them feel human, important, and valued. One day, a local teacher who often brought students to help noticed the store owner watching from across the street. The teacher approached him gently and said, "You see what she's doing, don't you? It's not about the food. It's about the way she makes people feel." The store owner nodded silently, not sure how to respond. He wanted to argue, to defend himself, but he couldn't. Deep down, he knew the teacher was right. The woman had built something that went far beyond cooking meals. She had built a community, and there was no way for him to compete with that. With the news spreading and donations arriving, she began to think about the future. She realized that she could reach more people if she organized her volunteers better and planned meals more efficiently. She started keeping a simple schedule, making sure every day's meals were ready in time for the growing crowds. She also began small workshops teaching children and teens basic cooking skills. These workshops were informal but meaningful. Children learned not only how to chop vegetables or measure ingredients, but also the importance of care, patience, and generosity. Teenagers discovered confidence in helping others and taking responsibility for meaningful tasks. Her backyard had become a place of learning as well as nourishment. Even as the crowds grew, she never lost sight of the individual. She still remembered each person's needs, preferences, and challenges. She spoke to them kindly, listened to their stories, and offered guidance when asked. Some people confided in her, sharing worries about jobs, bills, or family problems. She would listen patiently, offering advice or just a kind word when needed. Her presence was healing, and people came to trust her not only as a source of food but as a source of hope. Meanwhile, the store owner's jealousy slowly began to change into curiosity. He started noticing small details, the way she greeted each person, the way she remembered names, the way children smiled when she spoke to them. He realized that he had been so focused on his own frustration that he had never truly understood what was happening across the street. He began to see that her work was not about competition or recognition, but about genuine care for others. That awareness didn't immediately erase his envy, but it planted a seed of understanding that would grow over time. The woman herself remained humble and focused. She didn't allow fame, attention, or donations to change her simple approach. She continued to cook every morning with the same love and care, treating every person as important and deserving. Volunteers continued to grow, bringing new energy, ideas, and resources. Families continued to come together, building connections that went beyond meals. Children learned life lessons, teenagers discovered purpose, and neighbors formed bonds that made the community stronger. Each meal was more than food. It was an act of love, care, and connection. Her efforts began inspiring others in small ways. People who received meals started offering help to neighbors in need. Families shared what they could. Children taught their friends about kindness, and teens carried the spirit of generosity into other parts of the neighborhood. The impact of her work rippled outward, touching lives that she would never even see. Her small backyard had become the heart of the community, a place where kindness, care, and humanity were nurtured every day. And all the while, the store owner continued to watch, slowly realizing that true influence doesn't come from money or competition. It comes from love, care, and the ability to make people feel valued. The woman had shown him that in ways he could never have imagined, and even if he wasn't ready to admit it yet, he was learning a lesson that would stay with him forever. Months had passed, and the woman's small backyard project had become much more than anyone in the neighborhood could have imagined. What had started as a humble effort to feed a few families now grew into a daily gathering that brought together dozens of people from all over the neighborhood. Children ran between tables, laughing and playing games, while teens helped distribute plates, carry trays of food, and make sure everyone had a place to sit. Families shared stories and connected in ways they had never done before. Elderly neighbors, who had once felt isolated or invisible, now felt seen, valued, and cared for. The backyard had become a place where people didn't just come to eat, they came to belong. The woman herself remained humble and focused. Every morning she rose early to prepare meals with the same care and attention she had always shown. She chopped vegetables, stirred pots, and baked bread, humming softly as she worked. She remembered each person's preferences, ensuring that everyone received something they could enjoy. If a child loved a particular vegetable or an elderly neighbor preferred a softer stew, she made it happen. Nothing was too small or too inconvenient if it meant someone felt cared for. She did all of this without seeking recognition, without asking for money, and without expecting anyone to acknowledge her efforts. Her reward was in the smiles she saw and the satisfaction of knowing she had helped others. The volunteers who had joined her continued to grow in number and confidence. Teenagers who had once wandered the streets aimlessly now had purpose. They learned not only how to cook and serve meals, but also how to listen to people, show empathy, and work as a team. Children learned the value of giving and helping others, sometimes carrying extra plates, washing dishes, or tidying the yard. Parents who had initially come only to receive meals began helping as well, bringing extra ingredients or sharing what they could with others. Every person who joined in felt like a part of something larger than themselves, a movement of care and kindness that grew with every passing day. Across the street, the store owner continued to watch. His jealousy had deepened over time, as he realized that no amount of advertising, discounts, or promotions could compete with the woman's kindness. People came to her not for products, but for connection, trust, and genuine care. He saw families he had known for years smiling as they left her yard, carrying meals and gratitude. Slowly, he began to realize that he could not compete with what she offered. His pride and envy made it difficult to accept at first, but he could not deny the truth. The woman's generosity had created something far more meaningful than his store ever could. As the weeks went by, the woman began thinking about ways to make her efforts even more impactful. She realized that while feeding people was important, teaching them to care for one another and build community was just as vital. She started small workshops in her backyard, showing children and teenagers how to cook basic meals, organize volunteers, and help others. She explained not just the mechanics of cooking, but the importance of caring for people, of noticing when someone needs help, and of giving without expecting anything in return. The workshops were informal, but they were powerful. Children learned life lessons while helping prepare meals, and teens discovered a sense of responsibility and purpose that they had never experienced before. Families began to participate in the workshops as well. Parents who had come only to eat now stayed to learn, helping their children understand the importance of generosity and community. They practiced cooking together, shared responsibilities, and bonded over tasks that at first seemed ordinary but carried profound meaning. The woman encouraged collaboration, ensuring that everyone contributed in their own way. Some brought extra ingredients, others helped organize seating, and some assisted in cleaning up afterward. Each person felt valued, each contribution recognized, and the spirit of giving grew stronger every day. Even as the community grew closer, the store owner's envy persisted. He had tried to discount his products, advertise more aggressively, and even warn people about free food being unsafe, but nothing worked. People continued to come to the woman's backyard, drawn by her warmth, care, and the sense of belonging she offered. Every time he saw children laughing, families sharing stories, or neighbors helping each other, he felt a mixture of frustration and reluctant admiration. He realized that he had been so focused on competition and profit that he had never understood the deeper needs of the community. The woman, through simple acts of kindness, had shown him a world that could not be bought or sold. Despite his jealousy, the store owner began to notice small changes in himself. Watching the woman's dedication and the joy she inspired made him reflect on his own actions and priorities. He realized that he had been missing something vital: the power of genuine connection, care, and empathy. He began to question his own behavior, wondering why he had allowed envy to dominate his thoughts for so long. He could see that money and products alone could never create the bonds and trust that the woman had built with her small acts of generosity. It was a difficult realization, but it was slowly changing him. The woman, however, remained completely unaware of the inner struggle happening across the street. She was fully absorbed in her work, focused on the people she served and the volunteers she guided. She moved gracefully among the crowd, making sure every plate was full, every person had a smile, and every need was met. Her attention to detail and genuine care created an atmosphere of trust and warmth. People knew they could come to her not only for food but for comfort, encouragement, and understanding. Her backyard had become a sanctuary where people felt safe, valued, and connected. One day, as she prepared meals, a small group of volunteers approached her with an idea. They suggested organizing a community event that combined cooking with storytelling. Families could share their own experiences, recipes, and traditions while helping prepare the meals. The woman loved the idea. She believed it would not only strengthen the community, but also give everyone a voice, a chance to contribute, and a sense of pride in their collective effort. She agreed, and soon preparations began. Tables were arranged, ingredients were gathered, and families started planning what they would share. The excitement in the backyard was palpable, and even the children were eager to participate. The event was a tremendous success. Families shared their stories while cooking, teaching one another recipes and traditions. Children learned about the importance of teamwork, respect, and empathy. Teenagers discovered confidence in organizing, helping, and leading others. Elderly, neighbors shared memories and wisdom, making the younger generation feel connected to the past. Every person involved felt a sense of belonging, pride, and accomplishment. The woman watched quietly, smiling as the community came together in ways she had always hoped for, but never imagined could happen on such a large scale. Even the store owner, standing across the street, could not help but notice the joy and unity that radiated from her backyard. He saw families laughing together, children learning and helping, and neighbors supporting each other. For the first time, he felt a pang of something he hadn't felt before. Admiration, mixed with the quiet realization that he had been missing something important all along. He had spent so much time worrying about competition and profit that he had overlooked the power of genuine kindness, care, and community spirit. Despite the growing recognition and success, the woman remained grounded. She did not let attention, donations, or growing crowds change her approach. She continued to serve every person with the same care, treat every volunteer with respect, and remember every detail about the people she helped. Her humility and focus on the human aspect of her mission inspired everyone around her. Children, teens, families, and neighbors all learned from her example, discovering that even small acts of kindness could have a profound impact on a community. The store owner's jealousy began to soften. He realized that trying to compete with her was pointless, and that he could either continue to resent her or learn from what she had achieved. Slowly, he began to consider how he could contribute in his own way, though he did not yet know how. Watching her work tirelessly, helping others and inspiring a sense of community, he began to understand that influence and respect are earned through care, not sales. It was a hard lesson, but an important one that he could not ignore. The woman's backyard had become a hub of activity, learning, and connection. It was no longer just a place to eat. It was a place to grow, to learn, and to share. Every day she nurtured not only bodies but hearts, minds, and relationships. Families who had once struggled in silence now felt supported and connected. Children learned empathy and responsibility. Teenagers discovered purpose and leadership. Elderly neighbors found companionship and respect. And all of it was built on simple acts of generosity, patience, and care. Through it all, she remained humble. She never sought recognition or reward. She never boasted or tried to gain fame. Her joy came from seeing the smiles on children's faces, hearing families laugh together, and knowing that she had helped someone in need. She had created more than just meals. She had built a community, a network of care, and a living example of the power of selfless kindness. And while jealousy still lingered across the street, it was slowly giving way to reflection, understanding, and perhaps, one day, change. The seasons began to change, and with each passing day, the woman's small backyard project continued to flourish. The once quiet and modest space had transformed into a lively hub of activity, learning, and care. Families, children, teens, and elderly neighbors gathered there, not just to eat, but to share stories, learn, and connect with one another. Her meals had become a symbol of love, compassion, and community, and people came from far beyond her street to be part of it. The neighborhood had changed around her, slowly but profoundly, shaped by the small but powerful acts of one woman who refused to turn away from those in need. The store owner, who had once watched with jealousy from across the street, had reached a turning point. He had spent months feeling envious, frustrated, and powerless as people flocked to her yard, ignoring his store. But slowly, he began to realize